So we're here today with Mark Cuban. We're going to talk cost plus drugs and everything else that he has going on, which is a lot. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What are the most important things to you as a business leader and an entrepreneur?
You know, it really depends where you are in your life. When you're just getting started, you may not be a leader to anybody more than the two people who work for you, but it's still a responsibility. And I think as you gain more success, however you define that, being a leader becomes more and more important. How you define success becomes more and more important. What you're able to do and the impact you're able to have becomes more and more important. Where I am in my life at this point, it means trying to accomplish things that I've dreamed about but was never in a position to try to accomplish or succeed at, and that's what I'm trying to do now.
At this point in your career, since you are so successful, what would you say motivates you?
Impact, trying to enjoy my family, enjoy just my life, but trying to do things that can disrupt things that have been done the way they've always been done and have an impact where I can.
What do you think is your biggest success to date?
My biggest success to date is probably my kids. They're everything to me. Outside of family, probably cost plus drugs. Even though we've just been at it and started shipping January of 2022, the impact is beyond anything Alex and I ever envisioned. And so to be at this point where now literally people are coming up to me in the street and hugging me and saying, you just cut my cost of medication from $1,500 a month to $17, and things like that. That's just insane, and that makes me feel great. Where I make my next dollar, it's not going to change my life. Where I get my next smile, where I get my next hug, that's life-changing.
So tell us about cost plus drugs, how you got involved in the company and in the national discussion and debate on drug pricing.
So there's two elements there. One is with healthcare. And so probably 2017, when there was a lot of discussion when the Republicans got into the White House about getting rid of the ACA, there was a big question mark about what would replace it. And so I was talking with various people in the administration, and they were like, well, if you have any ideas, let us know. And so I started looking at what could be created to replace the ACA. So I started funding these studies with various economists to just look at what are the underlying costs of healthcare. And around the same time, I got a cold email from Dr. Alex Oshmayansky. And he was telling me about the pharmacy, the compounding pharmacy he was creating in Denver that was looking for funding to be able to create drugs to handle shortages of drugs. So very often drugs, even generic drugs, go in short supply, and when that happens, either somebody jacks up the price or it just is not available or very difficult to get. And so as we were going back and forth via email, I started asking questions, well, why stop here? And that was when Martin Shkreli was doing his thing and he was going to jail. And I was like, well, if this idiot can jack up prices 1,500% or whatever it was for Daraprim, that means there's fungibility in the pricing. There must be an opportunity to reduce the cost as well. Can we look at that? And so that's where we started the process of working together to say, okay, what are all the regulatory issues? What are all the pharmacy issues? All the things all the I's you have to, the dot and T's you have to cross just to be in this business. And that took about 3 years. And we finally got to the point where it was, okay, let's start working with a drug called albendazole, where we had somebody manufacture it for us. And what albendazole is a drug for hookworm, for parasitics. And it's still a problem in rural areas of Alabama and Texas, South Carolina, and other places across the country. And it costs $200 per course. And I was like, well, if we manufacture it or have somebody manufacture it for us, what could we sell it for? And he was like, $12. I was like, okay, that's an indication that maybe there's something that we can change here. And so we went through the process, working with Baylor School of Medicine and I think it was their health sciences group, and had somebody manufacture it for us, went through the whole FDA approval process, worked with a bunch of clinics where we provided to them a cost and then started selling it as a cost plus drugs branded drug. And we learned some things there and said, okay, now it's time to expand. Can we go and work with a bunch of generic manufacturers to offer as many drugs as we possibly can? And that was the genesis of where we are today with cost plus drugs. We partnered with a company called TruePill, who's been great to work with, where they help provide software and build the website and all that, and became our dispensing pharmacy. And that shortcutted a lot of the dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And in January of 2022, this year, we launched our website and started shipping about 110 drugs. And from there, we've grown to probably 900, by the time people see this, 950 of the top 1,000 generic drugs that are available that we're offering on cost plus drugs.
Mm-hmm. And you have about 1 million people on board already.
Yeah, so we're adding anywhere on a weekend, well, now it's changing by the day, but let's just say 5,000 to 10,000 people per day. And that number is going up like this. All our numbers are going up like this, like a hockey stick. It's incredible.
I don't think a lot of people know that this is something that you've been working on quietly for years now.
Yeah.
It just kind of popped up.
No, it didn't just, okay, let's just launch our website, because you've got to get, before a drug manufacturer, whether it's generics or brand, is going to work with you, they have to trust you. And they have to believe you're not going to screw up their business, and you're going to create more demand, and you're going to take care of patients and do it the right way. And that's one of the reasons I put my name on it. There's never been a for-profit company, or private benefit company for that matter, that I've put my name on before. I've done it on foundational stuff, but never on a regular company. And I put it on there to show people that I was serious, that I was financially committed, and that we were going to make this work. And that helped us get contracts with multiple generic manufacturers, which helped us push down the pricing further, which allowed us upon launch to be able to offer the 110 drugs. And I'd say part two to what we came up with in launching cost plus drugs was transparency. Because the missing element in all of healthcare right now is trust. And the only way you're going to get people to trust you is to be completely transparent. And so what we decided to do, which was unheard of and people thought we were crazy, was to show our price and to only mark things up 15%, show you what our TruePill pharmacy handling fee, and show you our shipping costs. So when you go to Cost Plus Drugs and costplusdrugs.com and you put in the name of the drug that you're looking to buy, you'll see exactly what we pay for it. You'll see that it's marked up 15%. We'll show you what the markup is. You'll see that there's a $3 handling fee for the pharmacy and $5 shipping. And that's it. And so which is great for patients, but a secondary effect has been that everybody in the industry can now see what we pay for a drug. And we may pay a little bit more than some other folks just because we may not be as big yet as they are, but everybody and anybody can see our costs. And so now you're starting to see studies come out comparing, what it would be, how much money Medicare would save if they bought from Cost Plus Drugs, working backwards for different studies to see what this generic or that generic actually costs. And so not only have we had an impact on patients' lives, but we've had an impact on the industry.
I actually spoke to the researcher behind the Harvard study.
Yes. And that was only 77 of the drugs that we sell. Imagine if they used all 900 plus.
Mm-hmm. And so what's your vision for the company and its impact that it could have on the pharmaceutical industry?
I mean, our mission is to be the low-cost provider of every medication that we're legally allowed to sell. Period, end of story. You're not going to see us add a ton of bells and whistles. You're not going to see telemedicine. You're not going to see adherence regimens. It's wrong that in this country, or anywhere for that matter, that people have to choose between their medications and rent and food and other important elements. And so if we can reduce that stress and solve that problem just a little bit, that's an amazing accomplishment. And so our mission is very singular, very direct, and very simple: to be the low-cost provider of medications for every drug we're allowed to sell, period, end of story.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of a bigger question.
Sure.
What changes would you make to American business and capitalism?
You know, first of all, when people talk about capitalism, you first have to ask what's the definition of capitalism. And I think it changes depending on what your positions are, what your ideology is. For me, capitalism means just being able to start a company or run a company and accomplish the goals that are important to me. It's not just about making as much money as you possibly can make. You know, and I think Gen Z today is changing that definition to be more widely accepted. You know, if you go back to the baby boomers, it's cash, 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 the yuppies, right? How much money can we possibly make? But just like on Shark Tank, Gen Zers and younger millennials that are coming on to pitch us businesses always have a social construct. There's always a social mission. And for Gen Z today making purchases, you know, because everybody's a brand now, because you're on Instagram, you're on Snapchat, you're on Be Real, you're on wherever, you know, what you wear is who you are to all your friends. What you're around and what people see you with is who you are to all your friends. And everybody, you know, wants to be perceived as in a positive light. And so capitalists of Gen Z and younger millennials are people who really find it important to have a social impact. And so whereas my generation might have looked at capitalism and said, you know, greed is good, you know, that's not the definition of capitalism anymore. Unfortunately, it's changing. We're getting to the point now where it's, you know, if you can start a company, what kind of impact can you have? Who can you benefit? How can you make the world better? And capitalism allows you to do that, and I think that's a good thing.
Everybody wants to know your opinion on this. Where do you stand on crypto today? Are you still bullish?
Yeah. So any new technology, I don't care what it is, and I've been involved with a lot of new technologies, disruptive technologies. I could take you back to the early days of streaming when we were the very first commercial streaming company. And right off the bat, it was hard to use. You know, if you think back to 1995 and you wanted to stream just audio, you had to have a subscription with an internet service provider. Then to make that work, you had to download a client which had a TCP/IP client. Then you had to download a streaming audio client, you know, and you had to have the right kind of modem. There were all these pieces that had to fit together. It was complicated. And so the uptake was big for sports fans and, you know, big news junkies, and everybody else were like, dude, you're an idiot. I'll just turn on my TV. You know, I'll just turn on the radio. What the hell do I have to go through all that hassle to just listen to a sporting event? And we reached that initial stage, and then all of a sudden it got a little bit boring, right? Because you had to wait for the new applications to come along. You know, we had to wait for live to come along. We had to wait for video to come along. We started, you know, streaming audio in 1995. When we did video, it was 1998, you know, and even then it was only postage stamp size. And it was only, you know, in 2012, let's say 2013, 14, almost 20 years later, where people looked at streaming like, okay, it's normal, right? You just click on Netflix and it just streams, and you don't have to do anything else. Well, with crypto, it's very analogous to that. We're in the early hassle phases. Now, the very earliest of crypto, you know, however you want to decide the beginning with Bitcoin or whatever, has been around 12 years. But in terms of applications with smart contracts, that's only 2017 for the most part. And so we're really only 5 years in. So I'm still really bullish on crypto. We had some early wins, just like, you know, streaming audio with sports and news. Now, you know, with crypto, you have DeFi and you have, you know, money transfer and some other applications, but you haven't had any mainstream applications where your mom says, okay, we've got to get a wallet because I have to do A, B, or C, right? It's been DeFi, NFTs, and money transfer. And so it's kind of boring right now. We're waiting for that next round of applications, and there's a lot of people working on them. You know, NFTs for the resale of books. So we take NFTs past the collectible markets to the utility markets. NFTs for refi, which is for carbon offsets, buying and selling and trading carbon offsets, and even burning them so that they're not resold all the time, but they have a direct impact on the environment. And there'll be more and more and more of those applications that bring in, that are more mainstream. But they're not all the way here. They're not truly mainstream yet. And so we're going through that lull. And you saw the same thing with the internet too, right? Until mobile phones came along, from 1995 to 2007 with the iPhone, meh, right? I mean, you had Amazon, you had, you could go shopping and you could stream, but it wasn't like it was just earth shattering. But once we got it on mobile, then we got the App Store in 2009? And then even remember there, the first apps on the App Store were like, here, look, let me hold my phone like this and it looks like I'm drinking a beer. Game. Right? Yeah, it looks like I'm drinking a beer. Just dumb shit. There's no reason why crypto is going to be any different. But the good news is, the investments I'm looking to make are geared towards applications that'll be mainstream and not about, okay, let's create an Instagram for crypto. Let's create a Twitter. Not Me Too type applications. More like, okay, things that take advantage of smart contracts and distributed environments.
I mean, you kind of touched on this, but what are some ideas and topics that make you excited?
NFTs is books, I think particularly for textbooks. Now, whether or not we can get the college textbook publishers to go along is another issue. But, the idea of kids buying books for classes today, my daughter just went to Vanderbilt. So the whole process of buying books, first, do you want to buy new or used? Right? Then you lug these books back, and then at the end of the semester, because they're only good for the time you were in the class, you make the decision. Yeah, I'm going to sell it. How do I sell it? Do I ship it off? Do I take it to the bookstore? It's just a pain in the ass, and in a digital world, it's ridiculous. And with those as NFTs, well, the NFTs allow you to apply royalties that when that book is resold, the author and the publisher and whoever else is involved can get a set royalty fee. So that means that the publishers and people who created the book can keep on getting paid, whereas when there's a physical book that gets sold and resold, they have to hope that book falls apart, and so that they can sell a new one. And so I think that's a great application. As I talk about environmental impact with trading of carbon offsets, I think insurance, being able to very easily buy insurance. But I think in terms of the home run type applications and more complicated, longer to develop type things, I think things like health insurance, right? The whole process of getting a claim pre-approved or approved after the fact is horrible. Nobody likes dealing with their insurance company, their health insurance company. First of all, for pre-approvals, you never know whether or not you'll get pre-approved or not. And when you go, it's not like the UK where you just go to the NHS and you just hope they have it, not if you'll get approved. Here it's like, all right, I have this need, the doctor's prescribing it for me, but I can't afford to pay it out of pocket. And so what am I going to do if my insurance company doesn't approve it? Well, with crypto, you could reinvent how insurance claims are pre-approved or approved by creating an environment where you have 1,000 validators. There's different types of roll-ups, optimistic roll-up where you have validators and challengers, right? So you could train people to be a validator and pay them every time they validate, approve or don't approve a claim. The optimistic roll-up side of it, the challengers will say, okay, you didn't approve this, but not for the right reason. Your training says you should have approved it. I'm challenging it. So anything that you're staking that you put up to get paid for that, I get, and that keeps it honest. That's just a crypto way of keeping things honest. And so that type of application has scale, it has impact, and it's better in a decentralized, wide and flat organization than vertically integrated company like our traditional companies. And I know that's deep in the weeds, but that's the reality, right? You've got, any tech advancement, you've got to start. Steve Jobs had this great saying. He said, everything's a remix. And you have to look at new technologies and look at things the way they're being done and say, okay, how can I remix these together? How can I do a mashup in music terms, right? And if you can mash this stuff up and have it make sense and make it easier and better for people to use, that's a big win.
Mm-hmm. So what's a typical day in the life like for you? How do you balance, your investment, Shark Tank, the Mavericks? How do you fit all of that into one day?
I mean, my days are pretty boring, honestly, because I do everything via email.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I rarely have meetings, really do sit-downs like this, rarely do phone calls. I mean, I'll do them. I might have 1 or 2 phone calls a day, which is that's an increase. It used to be 1 or 2 a month. Maybe 1 meeting every 3 weeks at the most. And so because I push everything to email, I'll get up, say goodbye to the 2 kids that are still at home before they go to school, unless they leave early, and then I'll grab something to eat, go back, sit in bed, or sit in my office and sit in a chair and just do emails for 2 hours. That's it. I'm just cranking out the emails because I want people to get a response as quickly as I can. And then I'll go to my office, sit in front of my computer, do more emails. And then I'll go work out if I can, or go play basketball if I can, and do more emails. And then my kids will come home, try to hang out, eat dinner with the fam, and do whatever from there. And during the Mavs season, I'll go to as many games as I can and watch them all or attend them all. And so that kind of breaks up my schedule from there. And it's really, really, really basic. But part of that is trying to keep up with everything. And so, when I'm not answering emails, I'm trying to learn. I try to be curious about everything technology related, and technology moves so quickly, whether it's AI, whether it's healthcare, whether it's medical technology, whether it's sports technology, computer vision. Those are the things that give me a competitive advantage. And so knowing those and being curious about them and just continuously updating my knowledge base on those is also important to me, and I'll spend time every day doing that.
Mm-hmm. What's been your favorite venture, and when have you had the most fun?
Cost Plus is definitely my favorite venture because it's been the most impactful. But when I had the most fun was when AudioNet turned into broadcast.com. We went public, and we were the broadcast network on the internet. We were going to everything and broadcasting everything from the Super Bowl to Victoria's Secrets, to business meetings, to you name it, because we were changing how media worked. And it was incredibly disruptive, and we had everybody telling us we were crazy, there's no way it would work. And all of a sudden, all these major companies were hiring us to broadcast their events. Every sporting event wanted to be broadcast, and so it was a blast. We were going everywhere, and as the technology became more commonplace and everybody became more comfortable with it, it just got bigger and bigger, and we got to do more and more fun things. So Todd Wagner and I, my partner and I, were having a blast.
What is your biggest regret when it comes to your business career?
My biggest regret was I wasn't as nice as I should have been. In my mind, I didn't suffer any fools, right? If I didn't think you were using common sense, then I would get annoyed. And no one liked to be around me when I was annoyed. And for me, it was just like faster, 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 faster. The train's speeding up. How fast can we go? That was a huge regret that I would do over again. I think with the Mavericks, when we had our problem with sexual harassment, and I wasn't there to oversee it, I thought by that point in time I wasn't, like today, I didn't go into the office ever. And so I missed it, and it hurt a lot of people, and that was awful. So I'd say, those two things are probably the lowlights of my career.
And then last question, who have been your biggest influences?
I'd say my dad. My dad did upholstery on cars and worked 6 days a week, getting up early, coming home late. Lost an eye. Physically was just beat the hell up. Crawling in cars, pulling out seats, cutting the tops off to turn them into convertibles. It was just, he busted his ass to do what he could for us. But he always smiled, and he was always great. And he just gave me the attitude that, work is work, but, you only have one life. And, it's interesting to me that, one of the questions people always ask me is, what would you tell your younger self? And they allude to the fact that, what would you tell your 16 or 17 or 18-year-old self? And really, that's not the self I would want to talk to. What my dad taught me was, talk to your 40-year-old self, your 50-year-old self, because we hit 40 and we think we're old. We hit 50 and you're going to think you're old. You're not. He was adamant about the fact that today's the youngest you're going to be, and you got to live young and be young and act young and feel young. The young 40-year-old, the young 50-year-old, that's who needs to hear it. And I learned that from my dad, and that was the most impactful thing. And then my wife and my kids, they don't listen to me, but I've learned to listen to them. and realize that it's their world. You know, it's not, and what I do today that can make their future better and brighter is important. And that the game is different, you know, whether it's climate change, whether it's healthcare. You know, my generation's an embarrassment, seriously. When I was, you know, 16, 17, 18, it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I thought we were gonna, you know, Abby Hoffman was taking over college campuses, or, you know, storming buildings and taking over the president of the college's offices, and we were going to be the revolutionaries that changed the world. We turned into the people who watch, you know, TV news all the time and make all our decisions from watching newscasts. That's an embarrassment. I want to avoid that and try to fight that off and try to learn as much as I can from my kids. And, you know, I'll give you one quick example. You know, I love to read, and I try to get my son, in particular my middle daughter, to read, and they're like, nah, we get it from video. And early on I was adamant, and then one day my son, and my daughter has examples too, but my son started asking me Shark Tank questions, and he was asking me, why don't I do royalty deals? And I started explaining, well, you know, it eats up cash flow and it reduces gross margin. I'm like, do you know what gross margin is? And he was like, yeah, it's the difference between your sales price and your cost of goods sold. I'm like, well, how did you, he was like 10 years old, 9, 10 years old. I'm like, how did you learn that? TikTok. And it made me realize that they weren't the one with the problem. I was the one holding on to things the way I did it, thinking that was the only way to do it. And I think that's what my kids are teaching me, that a lot of the things that, you know, my generation might look down on for my kids, they got it right and we got it wrong.
Mark, thank you so much for everything today.
Thanks for having me.